What if I told you that one of the smallest nations in Southeast Asia is doing something no one else dared to do? While most countries in the region stayed silent, the Philippines opened its doors to Ukrainians fleeing war. This unexpected decision has left many asking, why the Philippines? And what does this mean for its future? The story begins thousands of miles away in Eastern Europe, where the war in Ukraine continues to reshape global politics. As millions of Ukrainians fled their homes, many countries stepped in to provide shelter. Europe led the way. The United States followed. But in Southeast Asia, almost everyone kept quiet. Everyone except the Philippines. So what makes the Philippines different? At first glance, it seems surprising. The country itself struggles with poverty, natural disasters, and economic challenges. It's not exactly known as a hub for refugees. And yet, in the middle of this global crisis, the Philippines chose compassion over caution. One reason is history. The Philippines has long been shaped by its own experiences with war and displacement. During World War II, millions of Filipinos lost their homes. They know what it means to be refugees in their own land. That history created a deep sense of empathy, an understanding that when people are forced to run, they deserve a safe place to land. But empathy alone isn't enough. The decision to welcome Ukrainians also reflects politics. The Philippines has been strengthening its ties with the United States and Europe, both strong supporters of Ukraine. By opening its doors, the Philippines sends a clear message. It stands with the international community against aggression. This is not the first time the Philippines has stepped up. In the late 1970s, it welcomed thousands of Vietnamese boat people fleeing the war. They were given shelter in Palawan before being resettled in other countries. For many Filipinos, this memory is alive, a reminder that their nation has always had a heart for those in need. Today, the situation is different, but the spirit is the same. While wealthier nations in Asia like Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand stayed on the sidelines, the Philippines took a stand. This shows that compassion does not always depend on size or wealth. It depends on values. Another reason is religion. The Philippines is the only majority Christian country in Asia, with deep ties to both Catholic and Protestant traditions. For many Filipinos, helping others is seen as a moral duty. When they see Ukrainians, also largely Christian, suffering, the connection feels personal. Churches, communities, and charities quickly mobilized to support the decision. But there's also a strategic angle. By taking this bold step, the Philippines has gained international recognition. It shows the world that despite its struggles, it is willing to shoulder responsibility in global crises. That kind of image matters when negotiating for aid, investments, or military partnerships. The Ukrainian refugees themselves are discovering something unique about the Philippines. They are not just finding safety, they are finding familiarity. English is widely spoken, making communication easier. The warmth of Filipino culture, the sense of community, and the shared Christian values create an environment where Ukrainians feel welcome, not isolated. For Ukrainians who have lost everything, this matters. A smile, a shared meal, a welcoming church. It all helps turn survival into belonging. This soft power is something the Philippines has in abundance. While other nations may offer resources, few can offer this level of human warmth. Of course, the decision is not without challenges. The Philippines is already dealing with its own displaced communities due to typhoons, earthquakes, and internal conflicts. Resources are stretched thin. Welcoming Ukrainians means sharing what little exists. This raises questions. Can the Philippines sustain this generosity? And will Filipinos accept foreigners competing for jobs and services? So far, the answer has been cautiously positive. Many Filipinos understand that welcoming Ukrainians does not mean ignoring their own struggles. Instead, they see it as part of being a responsible member of the world. They believe that compassion is not a zero-sum game. It can grow when shared. International observers are also taking notice. By being the only Southeast Asian country to openly welcome Ukrainians, the Philippines has set itself apart. It may gain diplomatic goodwill that could translate into stronger ties with Europe, more aid packages, or preferential trade deals. But it also risks angering others. Russia remains a powerful player in Asia, and some worry that the Philippines' stance could create tension. Russia has invested in the region and maintains influence through energy and arms deals. By siding with Ukraine, the Philippines might be closing doors to those opportunities. Still, the government seems willing to accept the risks. For them, the long-term benefits outweigh the short-term costs. Aligning with the United States and Europe strengthens the Philippines' security in the face of its own challenges with China in the South China Sea. It's a strategic calculation dressed in humanitarian language. What makes this story so powerful is that it's not just about politics or economics. It's about people. The story of a Ukrainian mother who lost her home in Kharkiv but found shelter in Manila. The story of children learning English in Filipino schools, laughing with classmates despite the pain of war. These are the stories that transform global headlines into human realities. Every Ukrainian who finds safety in the Philippines becomes part of a much larger story. A story about solidarity across continents, about how one small nation chose to act when others remained silent. And this is where the Philippines' strength lies. It may not have the wealth of Japan, the power of China, or the influence of Singapore. But it has something more valuable, the courage to do what others will not. That courage, rooted in history, faith, and humanity, is what sets the Philippines apart. As the war in Ukraine continues, the role of the Philippines will remain symbolic but meaningful. It cannot absorb millions of refugees, but it can set an example. It can show that even nations with their own struggles can still choose compassion. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. In a world increasingly defined by self-interest, the Philippines reminds us that generosity is still possible, that small nations can lead in ways that big nations often overlook, that humanity, not just power, can shape geopolitics. So why is the Philippines the only country in Southeast Asia welcoming Ukrainians? Because its history taught it empathy, because its faith taught it compassion, because its politics taught it strategy, and because its people taught it that no one should face war alone. This combination of heart and strategy explains why the Philippines stands alone. It is not weakness, it is strength. And as long as Ukrainians need shelter, the Philippines will remain a symbol of hope in Southeast Asia. The bigger question is what happens next. Will other Southeast Asian nations follow this example? Or will they continue to stay silent, watching from the sidelines? Only time will tell. But one thing is already certain. The Philippines has written itself into the story of Ukraine's struggle, and the world will not forget it. The decision may not make the Philippines richer or stronger overnight, but it makes it respected. And respect, in the long run, is a form of power that no army or economy can easily replace. In the end, the Philippines' choice is about more than just Ukraine. It is about the kind of country it wants to be in the 21st century. A nation that doesn't just think of itself, but dares to stand for others. That kind of courage is rare, and that is why the world is paying attention. What many people don't realize is that the Philippines' openness is also a reflection of its diaspora experience. With more than 10 million Filipinos working or living abroad, the country understands migration better than most. Families are used to having loved ones overseas, often in vulnerable situations. They know what it feels like to depend on the kindness of strangers in foreign lands. This collective experience makes Filipinos more empathetic to refugees. When a Ukrainian family arrives in the Philippines, they are greeted not just by officials, but often by ordinary citizens who know what it's like to be far from home. This cultural familiarity with migration creates a unique, welcoming atmosphere. It's not perfect, resources are limited, housing can be a challenge, but the emotional understanding runs deep. Another factor that explains the Philippine stance is its constitution and legal framework. Unlike many countries in Asia, the Philippines has laws that align more closely with international refugee protections. It is a signatory to agreements that emphasize human rights, And while implementation can be inconsistent, the willingness to uphold these principles exists. This sets it apart from neighboring countries where strict immigration controls or national security concerns usually block refugee acceptance. And then there is the question of global image. The Philippines is often portrayed as a developing nation struggling with corruption, poverty, and natural disasters. By welcoming Ukrainians, it flips that narrative on its head. Instead of being seen only as a country in need, it presents itself as a country that gives. This subtle but powerful shift builds soft power, which is becoming more important than ever in international relations. The timing of this decision is also important. The Philippines is redefining its place in the world. It wants stronger ties with the West, while also asserting itself in Asia. Welcoming Ukrainians gives it moral credibility on the international stage. It allows Filipino leaders to stand in meetings with European counterparts and say, "We did our part. We share your values." That kind of moral authority can't be bought, it must be earned. Let's not forget the role of ordinary Filipinos. Unlike in some countries where refugee acceptance sparks backlash, many Filipinos have responded with warmth. This doesn't mean there's no criticism. Of course, there are questions about resources and priorities. But overall, the tone has been one of solidarity. Community groups, churches, and NGOs stepped in quickly to provide support. This grassroots response shows that compassion is deeply embedded in Filipino society. For Ukrainians, the Philippines offers something more than temporary shelter. It offers the chance to rebuild lives. Children can enroll in schools where English is the medium of instruction, giving them continuity in education. Adults can find work in industries that value communication skills, from teaching to service roles. Even in the face of hardship, there are real opportunities to integrate, at least for the short term. Interestingly, this openness is also tied to the Philippines' long relationship with the West. Decades of American influence, from education to governance, created systems where English proficiency and Western legal frameworks are the norm. This means Ukrainians arriving in Manila face fewer cultural shocks compared to arriving in Bangkok or Jakarta. The familiarity with Western practices makes integration smoother. But it's also worth noting that the Philippines' choice isn't entirely about selflessness. There is a pragmatic side. By positioning itself as a humanitarian ally, the Philippines strengthens its bargaining power for aid, trade, and security guarantees. International goodwill often translates into real benefits, whether through foreign investments, military equipment, or development programs. In this sense, compassion and strategy go hand in hand. The bigger picture reveals something even more striking. The Philippines is quietly becoming a bridge between East and West. Its culture, shaped by both Asian traditions and Western values, gives it a unique position. By welcoming Ukrainians, it reinforces this identity, an Asian nation that understands and embraces global responsibilities. Few countries in the region can claim this role. The Ukrainian refugees who settle in the Philippines will carry these experiences back with them if they ever return home. They will tell stories of a faraway country in Asia that opened its arms when others didn't. These stories become part of Ukraine's memory of the world's response to their crisis. And in international politics, stories matter. They build reputations that last far beyond a single conflict. Looking forward, the Philippines faces the challenge of making this generosity sustainable. Can it continue to welcome more Ukrainians if the war drags on for years? Will its people maintain the same level of support if resources become tighter? These are questions that remain unanswered. But the fact that the Philippines acted when no one else in Southeast Asia did already sets it apart. In many ways, the decision is a gamble. It could stretch domestic systems, create local frustrations, or even spark diplomatic tensions. But it could also pay off enormously by putting the Philippines on the global map as a moral leader. And in a world where narratives shape alliances, that kind of leadership is invaluable. Ultimately, the answer to why the Philippines stands alone lies in its unique mix of history, faith, migration, and politics. Each element feeds into the other, creating a society where welcoming Ukrainians is not seen as strange, but natural. It's a nation that knows pain but chooses compassion, that faces challenges but still chooses to give. And maybe that's the greatest strength of the Philippines. While bigger, richer countries hesitate, the Philippines acts. While others hide behind excuses, it steps forward. That courage, even when resources are limited, is what truly sets it apart. So when a question is asked, why is the Philippines the only country in Southeast Asia welcoming Ukrainians? The answer is not just about policy or strategy. It's about character. The character of a nation that has endured suffering and chosen empathy. The character of a people who know what it means to need help and, therefore, are willing to give it. In a world where refugees are often treated as burdens, the Philippines offers a reminder that they are first and foremost human beings. And sometimes, humanity is all that matters.